The Obama economy is a disaster. Obamacare is a train wreck. And the Obama-Clinton foreign policy of leading from behind. The whole world's on fire. The world is on fire. Yes, your world is on fire.
Senator Ted Cruz visiting with voters in New Hampshire, and a young lady a little bit too young to vote, a 3-year-old, saying, wait a minute, the world's on fire? Now, despite some of the reports, that little girl's mother has been contacted by news organizations, and she said the senator did not scare her child. As a matter of fact, he is her new hero. But a moment like that is just too delicious politically not to talk about. So let's bring in our political panel. For the Democrats, Dave Aronberg, the state attorney for Palm Beach County, in our Newsmax TV newsroom. And Skyping in also from the Sunshine State, we've got Ed Pozzuoli, the Republican who also serves as the president of the Tripp Scott Law Firm. So, it's kind of instructive how this happens. Whole lot of headlines said, there's Ted Cruz terrifying this little girl. And yet her mom said that was not the case. Ed, your take on this curious episode involving Senator Cruz.
Well, I mean, I thought it was President Obama asking that question just in that way. I mean, Ted Cruz is right. The world is a dangerous place, and it is on fire. Look at the Middle East. Look at what the Obama administration's response to the terrorist threat of ISIS has been. It's been head in the sand. Let's let it burn. And that's what's happening in the Middle East. So Ted Cruz, there's a lot of what he says is not hyperbole. It's truth.
Dave, let me get your take on it and the different headlines that we've seen about all this.
Well, as an initial matter, let me tell you that I went to law school with Ted Cruz. He lived right below me, and I knew him pretty well there. And he's an entertainer. He's someone who says things to get a reaction, and he did from the 3-year-old girl. I hope that's not his constituency because they can't vote. He is someone who's very smart, but he's not going to be president. He says things for an effect, and that's what he did here.
Oh, but you said there he's not going to be president. You would deny your classmate that opportunity, David?
Well, he was a year ahead of me, and I think he made law review. He's smarter than I am, but he is someone who is so far right, and he says things that, and he doesn't care if people like him or not. Look at the rest of the Senate; they're not fond of him, even his own Republican friends.
Yeah, but I know some of those guys, David. I've tangled with a few of them, and I understand what's happening there. Listen, let's let Ted Cruz speak for himself. He was on Morning Joe. Let's listen to what he had to say, then we'll get your reaction.
I actually talked to the mother yesterday, called her because she was very dismayed. I mean, this is blown up in the media.
Yeah.
Every reporter has written about it, and it's gotten worse and worse. It was first girl startled, then it became girl terrified.
It's cute.
By the end of it, I'm Freddy Krueger, like torturing this girl in her nightmare. And I'll tell you, it was funny because Julia, the little 3-year-old, she was in the background, and her mommy said, Ted Cruz is on the phone. Who's Ted Cruz? And Julia, at the top of her voice, said, the fireman!
So there you go. Now, David, you got to admit, he may have been not your same year at law school, but that's pretty good damage control with that explanation, is it not?
Yeah, he is a real smart guy and a real smooth talker, and I liked Ted in law school. But, you know, he was far right back then, and the Republican Party has switched so much, shifted to the right, that he is now able to run for president, even though I said he's not going to be elected. But he loves stuff like this. This gets him on the talk shows when he can make a 3-year-old call him a hero or cry or either one. It gets people talking about him.
Well, we are talking about him. Ed, David's a charming guy, but it's always just how far right us rascally Republicans are, and I guess by David's standards, I'm just an out-and-out reactionary. This continual labeling of Republicans being so far to the right.
You know, he didn't take David's smart enough to know he didn't take issue with what Ted Cruz actually said. So that was kind of a win on our side, an acknowledgement by David that the world is burning somewhere. And, you know, Ted Cruz, there's no damage control necessary. Ted Cruz, honestly, I viewed the videotape. The videotape looked great. He handled it well. The little girl wasn't frightened. She was simply expressing an opinion based upon what he said, and he handled it perfectly, to be blunt. And let's face it, you can't buy the type of publicity he's getting from this at this point.
Well, it is interesting to watch him come out and explain the old maxim, as all of us know, gentlemen, in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing. But be that as it may, I tell you what, we don't want to lose any more time with you. That's why we're going to ask you to kind of take a break here. Get ready to match wits once again. Our political panel will return right after this on America's Forum.
How can you get the...
An alarm should be sounding in our ears. Our enemies, sensing weakness and hence opportunity, have become steadily more aggressive. Our allies, uncertain of our commitment and capabilities, have begun to conclude that they must look out for themselves, even where it's unhelpful to civilian order. Our military, suffering from years of neglect, has seen its relative strength decline to historic levels.
Arkansas's Tom Cotton making his maiden speech in the United States Senate. In those remarks, warning the world is growing more dangerous, he began that Senate address quoting Winston Churchill, warning against Adolf Hitler's rise to power in Germany. Against that backdrop, let's continue our political discussion with Democrat Dave Aronberg, state attorney for Palm Beach County, and Republican Ed Pozzuoli, the former co-chair of the Jeb Bush for governor campaign in the Sunshine State. So, David, before you say Tom Cotton is too far to the right, he's quoting Winston Churchill, for crying out loud. He makes a valid point, does he not?
I love Churchill. He's a hero of mine, so I always respect people who can quote him. I do think, though, it's a little early to start comparing ISIS to Nazism. Nazis were a state actor. They had a lot more resources than ISIS, which is a group of murderous thugs out there who really do need to be defeated. I think it's important to call attention to it. This world is a very dangerous place, but I think it is still a little bit of an exaggeration to compare ISIS to Nazi Germany.
Ed, we just heard from previous guests, ISIS very busy killing Christians in the Middle East. One guest yesterday likened it to a Christian Holocaust. Is it too early to make that kind of comparison, ISIS with Hitler's Third Reich?
Well, it was too early, I guess, based upon what David said when Neville Chamberlain tried to negotiate a delicate peace with Hitler, and appeasement policy was put in place. That wasn't too early then. No one thought that then, except for Churchill. And I think the analogy here is correct. I mean, the Obama administration is doing its best Neville Chamberlain impression. And so we need to get tougher, and a strong defense is the best way to a peaceful world.
Dave, it seems there's a paradox. President Obama is very effective when it comes to fighting Republicans and engaging in political battles here at home, but he seems to be somewhat indulgent of those who might contest our interests abroad. Just last night on Vice TV, he was asked about ISIS. He once compared that to the JV squad, and then he blamed Bush last night. Is that, I guess it's effective politics, but in your mind, is that a realistic interpretation of the rise of ISIS?
Well, ISIS stemmed from the fallout of Bush's invasion into Iraq, where, as Colin Powell said, you break it, you own it. I mean, that's what happened when the Sunnis all of a sudden splintered, and then you had the rise of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and ISIS filled a power vacuum. So, Bush is partly to blame. I would not put all the blame on Bush. I mean, I think, as your previous guest had said, there are other factors at play. The Iraqi army is partially to blame. And yes, I do think that we pulled out of Iraq too early, and that led to this power vacuum. But, I don't think it's really positive to spread blame right now when we need to get together, unite, and fight this enemy. It is a real enemy. I do not think President Obama is anything near Neville Chamberlain. He is aware of this threat, and he's leading our efforts. So we're far away from German Nazism and Neville Chamberlain. I think that is just something that's too divisive for us to start throwing haymakers like that at each other politically, when we need to unite to fight this common enemy.
And after all, the president's not been seen carrying an umbrella. Ed, got to ask you about this. It shows up in the polling. Look, in one sense, you can't blame the president. When they go out and poll, it seems to be effective to always blame Bush. Last 30 seconds to you, Ed.
No, we actually fixed what we broke. The government in Iraq was becoming stable, and then President Obama pulled the troops out, caused a vacuum to occur. ISIS didn't even exist under Bush, and now it does because of the vacuum. Obama's withdrawal impacted that, and that's why we have ISIS today.
Gentlemen, we very much appreciate this civil, polite, political discussion. Dave Aronberg, state attorney for Palm Beach County, and Ed Pozzuoli, the former co-chair of the Jeb Bush for Governor campaign. Really appreciate your time. Hope you'll come back and visit with us again. Coming up next, the former Speaker of the Missouri State House.